Hello, my name is Simon McDonald, and welcome to the second campaign diary for my group's D&D game set in Curse of Strahd, which is a 5th edition adventure by Wizards of the Coast, which is this sort of gothic horror thing with vampires and werewolves. It's a lot of fun. So the last video covered the intro to the series and character creation, and this one is more about the first actual session of play that we had and how that went and what happened. I will reintroduce the characters if you're either new or you just forget from the first video, which is totally reasonable. It was 2 weeks ago. So our characters are Mikael Cloacus, who is a dragonborn wizard. We have Sai Galanadil, who is a wood elf druid. We have Manio, who is a Goliath paladin. We have Jacques Lefebvre, who is a human warlock with a very hard to say name. We have Francis Forbes, who is a human fighter, who's a battle master, which is probably the most interesting variant of fighter that doesn't have spells and stuff, because they actually get to do cool maneuvers. I started in media res in the village of Belcroft, which means in the middle of. So the middle of the action, which is, in this case, them talking to the leader of the village after they had already agreed to take on this contract to take down these wolf creatures that have been plaguing their farmlands. And I meant to say wolf creatures, but I said werewolves immediately, which kind of spoiled the reveal I was planning for later, but oh well. But I started afterwards, after they had already accepted, because it gave them a chance to ask questions and haggle for money, which players absolutely love doing. Even if they don't know how much money means anything in this world, they love, especially new players, love haggling for money. But the reason I gave it to them like that is because it's hard to roleplay with an NPC, especially with a new character. But when you have a really clear set of goals for a conversation, it makes it a lot easier, and that was that. They need to ask questions, they need to get gold. After they talked to the Reeve of Belcroft and sort of haggled very poorly, thanks to some very inauspicious beginning rolls for the campaign, the party decided to split up, and Jacques and Mika wanted to go check out the temple that they had seen, and Manio and Francis wanted to go to the general store and stock up. And Sai didn't want to do either of those things, so she decided, as a druid does, to go meditate beside the fields. So Jacques and Mika were quite surprised by the fact that the priestess that was running the temple actually met them en route and said that they were looking for them, because they had heard that Mika and Manio were sort of a more religious bent, Manio being a paladin and Mika being this theurgist wizard. And she said that a fell artifact had been stolen from their temple and that she wanted their stalwart help to retrieve it. She thinks it was the wolf creatures, and they sort of questioned her for a while and got to talk, and they found as they were walking back to the temple that her mentor had left it there in her care before he left, which is good to have a little bit of mystery, because she didn't know why, or like why he had that or who it belonged to or anything like that. And so they went to the back room and they found this clawed up floorboards with a hole where it once was, and on a successful wisdom check by Jacques, he discovered that there was definitely some dark magic going on there, and it was probably wolves that took it. It seems how there was a bunch of claw marks, though probably not normal wolves, given that normal wolves don't usually care about cursed axes or axes with dark properties. So they questioned the priest for a little while more before heading back, and then I was able to switch to Francis and Manio, and I'm relaying it to you as one complete thing, but I was bouncing back and forth, which is good to keep everybody engaged. I even bounced back to Sai and said that she had attracted the attention of a local boy who saw her meditating and tried to imitate it. She sort of gave him a little instruction, which was a nice little bit of character moments. But Francis and Manio stocked up on the stuff that they wanted to get, apart from the perfume that a small farming village didn't have, that Francis wanted. I'm still not sure why he wanted that. Maybe he just wanted to smell good. That's a worthy cause, I think. Getting the quest to kill the wolf creatures, or deal with them at least, and also retrieving the axe for the priestess in the village of Belcroft are two examples of hooks I wanted to plant before the group actually began Curse of Strahd, because I wanted them to have connections to the outside world and reasons for what they were actually doing, so that they could use that to guide them whenever they were just in Barovia and maybe feeling a little bit directionless. Those quests in hand, the party made their way to the Whisperwood, where the wolf creatures were rumoured to be, and they camped out there for the night, where they were taking turns watching and stuff. And this is where I seeped into the creeping fog opening for Curse of Strahd, which is as they are taking watch and they're going to sleep on one by one, this really thick fog begins to creep in, and then as they all go to sleep and wake up the next morning, they see that these trees are not the same trees that they went to sleep around. These ones are like big and gnarled and like clawing at the sky. And Curse of Strahd's got all this great evocative text that you can read aloud, and the descriptions are very good. So they're surrounded by fog on all sides. It seems to be like thin in front of them, and they can maybe see a road in the distance, where they didn't see one the night before. It seems very thick behind them, and they're understandably quite confused. They decide to start testing the fog behind them, the really thick fog, because they decide this place is shitty, let's leave. And they soon discover that the fog in Curse of Strahd is kind of special, because as they push into it, every 6 seconds, which is like a round in combat, every 6 seconds that they spend in that fog, they suffer 1 level of exhaustion. And that doesn't sound that bad. It's only disadvantage on ability checks, which is you roll 2 dice and you take the lower result. But there are 6 levels of exhaustion, and the 6th level is death. And every 6 seconds you spend in that fog, you have to make a really hard constitution check to see if you're hardy enough to endure it, and if you fail, you suffer a level of exhaustion. So eventually you're going to get to 6 and you're going to die. So a couple of the players jetpacked out of there. They just decided to leave after they suffered 1 level of exhaustion, and a few others continued on while tying ropes to each other, and they all suffered 2 levels of exhaustion, and they ended up, as they progressed into the fog, they just came right back out. They didn't turn around, they just came back out where they had begun going in. And they decided at this point to take a short rest because they were all exhausted. And I ruled at that point that a short rest would just remove this second layer of exhaustion, because that was disadvantage on attack rolls, and that's actually quite crippling if they're going to have any kind of fight. And I didn't want their first fight to be incredibly hard. So usually you need to sleep to remove any levels of exhaustion, but I just ruled that it removed this special kind of exhaustion because that seemed more fun for the first ever session. Maybe in subsequent sessions, if they try it again, I'll do something different, but for now, that seemed right. After the players rest for a while, they decide that, hey, maybe this road isn't so bad after all, and they sort of go down it, and they travel for hours, noticing that this land seems a lot more dismal than the land that they just left. This doesn't seem like the Whisperwood that they remember, and there's this really thick mist, and as they try and climb trees and see over it, they just can't see very far at all because it's just so all-encompassing. And the hours just seems way later in the day than it should be, considering they went to sleep at night and woke up presumably like well rested 8 hours later. So they're kind of a little bit weirded out, and as they're traveling along for a while, they come upon this massive set of steel gates set in this decrepit wall with these 2 giant statues with their heads toppled off, and it's kind of intimidating looking. They're really, really, really tall, like 50 feet tall or higher, and they can only make out this illegible text that just says bar over the top, and the rest of it is just, they can't read it. And they decide after a while to go through it, and it's great because as they get close to the doors just slowly open by themselves, and as they go through, they slowly close behind them with this big resounding clang, which is great because the players instantly go like, oh fuck, which is wonderful as a DM to hear. The party travel on for another while after the gates, maybe another hour or 2, maybe 5, and they come across this body off to the side of the road. Sai, the wood elf druid, notices it. She's the one with the highest passive perception, so she catches the scent of death in the air, and they investigate, and they discover this body clutching a letter to its chest, and it's covered in paw tracks all around it. And they lift up the letter and they open it and they read it. And Curse of Strahd has all these really great handouts and stuff in the back. Well, not really handouts, because unless I photocopied it, I couldn't hand it out. But it's this beautifully written letter, but it's beautifully written in cursive, joined up writing, and it's kind of hard to read. So I had to Google a plain text version, and that's what I read out to the players. I kind of wish I had printed it out and then given it to them, because then they could have had the joy of trying to read it quickly themselves as opposed to me. But anyway, they read it, and it's from this burgomaster of Barovia who's telling them that this land is cursed and they should just seal it off and surround it with the symbols of good and wait for them to all die and then come and claim whatever riches remain once they and the devil who dwells here is dead. So, encouraging words for the heroes to hear when they're trapped in this weird, strange land. After that, and after the players talk for a while, they hear this howl off in the woods, a wolf's howl, and it doesn't really bother them. And then I say that they're getting another one happens about 6 seconds later, and the players still don't say anything. And as they go on, they eventually go like, oh, hey, maybe we should do something about this. But at that point, they've waited so long that I have them make a dexterity check to see if they can do what they want to do before whatever's making these howls shows up. And they do not do well. So one of them is in the middle of trying to set up a trap, and they don't have time to get away from it. And one of them's trying to climb a tree, but they don't quite manage it. And these 5 direwolves show up. And their direwolves are like regular wolves, but like massive. They're like shoulder height, and they march out of the woods, and then I have them all roll initiative, and it's the first combat of the campaign, and they all do real bad on initiative. So we have the fight with the direwolves, and it's great for the players to be able to show off all their skills and try out these new abilities that they have. It was a fairly standard fight, and the standout moment for me probably was how Rachel's character Sai transformed into a direwolf herself and somehow managed to decapitate another direwolf. And that you will see that will be a recurring theme for Rachel's character as the campaign progresses. The players had a lot of fun during the fight, but I think it was definitely a little bit of fatigue by the end of it. And I think the reason for that is that direwolves are just interesting because they're fast and they're big and they can knock people down, but they are all the same. It's 5 of the same monster, and they have like a good chunk of hit points. So it wasn't like quick deaths or anything like that. Next time I throw an encounter at them, I definitely want to vary it up more with more ranged enemies and enemies that do weird stuff and stronger ones and stuff like that, just to keep it more interesting for them and for me. After the players dealt with that, they were going to short rest, but then they heard more howls, so they decided to go back to the road, and they short rested for a little bit there to recover some health from the fight, as Francis actually went down during it, and which wasn't as his character is kind of really wrapped up in his past glories and how he's never risen above that. And now that this has happened, and in the first fight he's fallen, that he got some great role playing out of that, did Roland. He was able to really roll that into, it doesn't bother me at all, which was really fun to see. They continue along the road for a while anyway, and they come upon the shadows of these buildings that are finally emerging, and the street turns from this rough mud road to these cobblestone streets. And as the players may have been feeling a little bit better with that they were finally among civilization of some sort again, they heard the mournful cries of a woman's voice echoing throughout the dark streets of mist. And that was where we chose to end the session. And I thought that was a good point too. I like ending on those kind of cliffhanger, at least some mystery for the players to think about before the next session. So the first session went really well. Everybody seemed to have a really good time, including Rachel and Johnny, which I was super happy about because it was their first time properly playing D&D, and you never know how people are going to react to it. But I know I had a great time DMing for everyone. Everyone seemed to get really into it. And yeah, it was just a really fun time. I definitely love running it from a book instead of just prepping it all myself. It was really nice to be able to just lean back on that stuff whenever I wanted to. I didn't feel like I needed to do a ton of prep, even though I did some beforehand anyway. And I'm also really glad with how well the village of Belcroft went, because it fulfilled exactly what I wanted. And I think I will definitely be using it anytime I run Curse of Strahd in future. And I'll probably just make it its own thing that I can use in other like adventures and stuff like that from now on, because yeah, it went really well. I was really happy with it. So that is the second campaign diary covering the first session of actual play for our Curse of Strahd D&D game. I hope you liked it, and if you did, please consider subscribing and telling your friends about it if you liked it. I know the next video will be in 2 weeks, and we'll cover our second session of actual play. And I hope to see you then. Until next time, see you later.